Morning, this is Luke Thornton, WebEx host. The meeting has left practice mode and is recording.
Now we're good.
Okay, let's take two. Welcome everyone and everyone online. I hope you can hear us okay if you're participating remotely, but an incredible thanks to everyone here, multidisciplinary as always, which is incredibly encouraging to all of us at the county level. Not only do we have human services, but nonprofits, faith-based community, law enforcement, our municipal elected leaders, legal, and so many from the community that are really active in talking about this issue around the homeless initiative. You know, we often say here that the Douglas County Homeless Initiative is about initiative. And our hope is to really mobilize our citizens, our businesses, and those in crisis to work together to identify solutions that are consistent with our regional pledge. And I see Dr. Reif here, and I'm very thankful for her being here and her engagement regionally. Did a wonderful regional presentation the other day, so thank you for that. But part of that pledge is for net zero is to ensure that homelessness is rare, infrequent, and non-reoccurring. That's an audacious goal, but we certainly believe that with the tools we have, a lot is possible. Another area of gratitude is seeing so many good potential concepts bubble up to this committee. And so today we're going to be talking about a lot of potential solutions with the goal of ramping those up, bubbling up through this executive committee to perhaps a work session for the Board of County Commissioners, and then maybe some direction. We often talk about the 4 C's, leading with compassion, and then code enforcement, continuum of services, and communication. You're going to hear today a lot of interesting ideas, and my invitation and request is that you be unabashed and open and share whatever criticisms, thoughts, yes, no's, this is horrible, this is great, and really ideas and ways in which we can refine some of these concepts and ensure that we're being a good local and regional partner on these issues. So with that, I will turn it over to Jen for a staff introduction. Okay. We may do a full introduction.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I thought I would take a moment to introduce Melanie DeHelicourt. She has just started with us in Douglas County. She's the Community Programs Administrator, and she's actually going to be working with us on a lot of the topics that concern this initiative. So she's going to be working with us to create partnerships, to do more coordination to increase our services that are available for the homeless population. So a lot of work around those topics as you're going to hear today, and Melanie will be helping us with a lot of that. So I wanted to make sure that we had a chance to introduce her to you all. And then maybe if we could just go through and do introductions around the room. Allison, you want to start us off?
So I'm Allison Cutting, and I'm the grants administrator for senior and transportation grants and community services.
Mike Paul Havis, the Rock Church.
That's a
Sorry.
Jamie Reif, executive director of the Metro Denver Homeless Initiative.
Rand Clark, community services manager, Department of Community Development.
Alex Pawski, Director of Operations with Denver South Economic Development.
Erin Johnson, Human Services. I oversee the public assistance programs.
Melissa Ingalls, Human Services with Douglas County as well. I oversee program integrity, child support services, and child care services.
David Moorhead, Castle Rock Police Department, and the Community Partnership Unit.
Darren Weekly, Captain, Douglas County Sheriff's Office.
Kevin Duffy, I'm the Law Enforcement Bureau Chief for the Douglas County Sheriff's Office.
Kevin Torrens, Castle Rock Police Department.
Jack Holly, Castle Rock Police.
Tim Beals, Lone Tree Police Department.
Kirk Wilson, Lone Tree.
Jennifer Eby, I'm the Assistant Director for Community Services and Community Development.
Tim Dietz, District 6 Town Council, Castle Rock.
Morning, Dan McKelty. I'm the Director of Human Services.
Abe Layton, Douglas County Commissioner, but more importantly, convener of really exceptional people. So it's my main role.
Lance Ingalls, Douglas County Attorney, and other duties as assigned.
Laura Sinconi, Douglas County Mental Health Initiative Coordinator.
I'm Maggie Cooper. I'm a projects manager for the county. I support the work of the mental health initiative and I oversee the CRT program.
Jay Carpenter, Lone Tree City Council.
Do we want to go to the back up there?
Maggie Tran, Douglas County School District.
Bob Pasney, Douglas County Libraries.
Nicole Adams, Douglas County APS and Child Protection.
Rich Nail, just a resident of Castle Rock, trying to determine how we can
Parents Training Community Development Director for Douglas County.
Okay, thank you, everybody, and thank you for joining us. We are so happy to see everybody and happy to see everyone online as well. I know we have strong participation online. So thank you all for joining us. We're going to go ahead. We have quite an agenda today, so we're gonna go ahead and jump on in. We wanted to start by, well, really just a big thank you to all of the jurisdictions for coming in and your willingness to talk to us about kind of what your current legal framework is and how you are, what your efforts look like with homelessness, what your challenges are, and having a robust conversation about that. So we appreciate you all being here. We're going to get started with Amy Edwards, who is with the Douglas County Attorney's Office, and she is going to talk to us about that from the county's perspective.
Morning, everyone. It's nice to see you all, and I apologize that I'm unable to be there in person this morning. But I put together this presentation hopefully to make it easy for everybody to understand, and I really want this to be part of our discussion today. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to jump in. So Jen had asked me to put together a presentation on our current code enforcement. And so when I looked at that, I was looking at everything, the codes, the ordinances, rules and regulations that I thought were most applicable to homeless issues that we've all been talking about. If you could go to the next slide, please. And so,
just please. Yeah.
If you can go to the next slide. So, under our current framework, the state of Colorado, you either fall under statutory governance or home rule governance. And so I just wanted to go over what the difference was and what that looks like for us. So Douglas County is under the statutory scheme. We're an agency of the state. And so what that means is that the county, our county and the commissioners, they have the powers that are expressly conferred to them by the Constitution, our state constitution, and our statutes. And I listed the statutes there. They also have implied powers that the courts haven't really defined exactly what that means, but what it comes down to is that whatever is reasonably necessary to carry out the express powers in the Constitution and the statutes. If you go to the next slide, please. So home rule governance, it's when a community has voted to be governed by a charter and they get to decide, for matters that are related to their local communities so they can make their own rules, govern themselves. And so they seem to have a lot more authority. So when we look and we've had these discussions about camping bans and panhandling bans and these different bans, and we're like, well, why don't we have that in Douglas County? It's because we are governed under statutory scheme. Whereas home rule municipalities like Colorado Springs or Denver, they can create these ordinances, rules, and regulations that fall within their charter. And so that's something to really, as we go through this, is to keep that in mind. So as Douglas County, we're more limited in what we can do as far as creating ordinances. I think it's interesting that there are a couple of counties that did adopt home rule charters, only 2 that are strictly, which is Pitkin and Weld County, and then Broomfield and Denver have a dual status. So they have a little flexibility, more than we do as a statutory county. Next slide, please. So these are the current ordinances and regulations that I found to be most applicable to the issues that we've found with homeless. So right now, when I reviewed the solicitation of occupant of vehicles, so that's like our anti-panhandling ordinance, for issues that we'll talk about later, you know, there's some things that we need to either just completely revise this ordinance. It's not constitutional right now as it stands, and that's because solicitation, the court has found, is a right. We have the freedom of speech, and it's a manner of speech. And so we would have to tailor it to a specific need that the county has pinpointed. The other thing to consider is that as of March of this year, the penalties, they did a reform for misdemeanor classifications and petty offenses, and they added the classification of a civil infraction, and so that's changed a bit. So if we go to the next slide, these are what I thought would be good changes to talk about and see what you all think. I propose that we look at a new ordinance, and I took this similar it's similar to one that Colorado Springs has, and they call it their Pedestrian Access Act, and it's something for us to consider. And the reason why this may be within the realm of our Constitution is if you look at the time and place. So they tailored this ordinance to specific times, and they found that they were having issues in their shopping districts, and so they did it at key times when you had patrons wanting to shop, but they felt threatened by the presence of number of homeless that were congregating or asking for money, or that were close to ATMs, and so it really presented a safety issue for the shoppers, and then that subsequently impacted the economic vitality of the business owners. And so it's not a blanket ban. It's has a specific time and place, and that's really key. And so then if we go to our current ordinance and we look at revising that, would be similar. We would have to tailor the time and place. And so that's really where looking at the studies that RAND has done, or the Douglas County Sheriff's Office, on what are our hot spots. Are we getting complaints? Is there, are there safety issues with the median size or the on and off ramps? So those are all things that we would have to somehow be able to support with something. I know that Lone Tree, they used a report to support some of their ordinances that basically looked at safety measures. And so I don't know if we have someone from Lone Tree today that can speak about that, but it's something that we could perhaps look at what they did and see how we can apply the same type of study to support our ordinance. So that we definitely have to have something to support that it's a safety issue. And that's really what our focus is on safety. And then just speaking with Jen, in preparation of this, she let me know about this proposed resolution, number 13-53. I looked at that and I think that looks really great. The only thing that I saw that would really probably need to be updated, was this change with the reform of misdemeanors and the classifications of petty offenses and adding the civil infractions. Yeah, I don't know that I don't believe that the current version that I saw took that under consideration. There was something I wanted to bring up about this. We had discussed under that resolution, what about vacant lands? Would that fall under the open space? And the definition within that resolution of county facilities does include any area that is part of or located upon lands owned, leased, or operated by Douglas County. So I think that would cover land that's been earmarked for a school, or it's been earmarked for something, but it hasn't been designated yet. So next slide, please. And so when we're looking at ordinances that we want to revise or put in place, these are the limitations these are our hurdles. Not to mention that it has to fall within, our statutory framework that we're governed by. But what's the current lay of the land is, the court has come out and said that the First Amendment protects panhandling and protesting. It's a protected activity. It's considered freedom of speech. And then we had the recent district court case that found that if there isn't shelter available, you can't enforce a camping ban. That's for areas that can, in fact, have a camping ban. Douglas County does not have, in the statutory framework that we're governed by, we don't have the ability to draft or have or enforce a camping ban ordinance. So when we look at shelter availability, so even if we want to move, if there are homeless present in an area that they're trespassing, or if we want to move them along, the hurdle that we're going to face is that we really have to be able to move them along to shelter. if there isn't shelter available, then we're not going to be able to enforce any penalty or citation that we would issue. And so that's where we have to look at, well, what can we use as shelter availability? So we talked about transitional housing. We talked about pods. I heard, discussion that there was hotel and motel vouchers that the churches were supplying, or even maybe the hotel and motel owners. I really am interested in the HMIS, and that's a homeless management information system. And just as I was, looking into this and really digging deep into it, it seems like a tool that I know that there are some strings attached, and I do believe that Jamie Reith may be speaking to it, or one of the other speakers can delve more deeply into what this encompasses. But there are only 2 counties that aren't presently using this. And what the ability to, as I understand it, is that it shows real-time availability of beds, as well as some really other cool things that I'll talk about later, a couple slides down. Next slide, please. So this is just where I know that we have talked a lot about putting a camping ban in place. As far as the county is concerned, we don't have the authority to do that. However, our municipalities that fall under home rule, they can put in a camping ban ordinance. But again, we aren't able to enforce this unless we have a place to put this person. So it does require that shelter is needed. So if you go to the next slide. So I really liked the idea of when we had discussed about putting together like a fund, posting signs, really having a like a public education or a program where we're really educating people on the issue of homelessness and how handouts don't help. So I took these are the signs that Colorado Springs currently posts. And it's working there. It appears to be working from who I've talked to and what I've read. And I think it's something that we should consider doing as well. And if we go to the next slide. The other thing that I found during this research that I thought was interesting and potentially worthwhile, and something that we should definitely discuss, especially with our law enforcement partners, is a trespass letter. And basically this is for a private property owner manager. And this letter, it's authorizing local law enforcement. So whether that would be Castle Rock Police Department or Lone Tree or the sheriff's office, but it's a letter that authorizing the local law enforcement to enforce parking overnight or parking at all on their private property, trespassing and littering on their private property. And it's an agreement between the property owner, manager, and local law enforcement that they can enforce, that they want local law enforcement to enforce these rules when it concerns their private property, but they also agree that they'll appear to testify if needed, if it's something that's going to be prosecuted. And Colorado Springs has got a very similar letter, and they have them sign it every 2 years. They have to renew it. So it's something, it's a tool that, you know, we can consider adopting in our county. Next slide, please. And so these were just some, you know, brainstorming with some of our local partners within the county. And I know that we're going to hear more about this today. I'm the first speaker, but just, you know, maybe there are things that we could take a second look at. I'm wrapping my head around the federal and state funding, but it does seem like there's a lot of funding out there to help us address what we're trying to do. And it may not be that there are so many strings attached. I definitely think it's worth, you know, considering creating a county community fund. And that's where those signs where, you know, handouts don't help, donate or text to donate, or have a website or something where people, instead of handing a homeless person $20, that they can instead know where that money is going, and it's going for services and programming to help fix the problem. In looking at I know that we had talked about CRT teams, but creating these homeless outreach teams where, you know, we had discussed, and I thought this was such a great idea, that it would be, you know, a human services navigator that, you know, once we connect with this person in need, they're helping them navigate the system to get them the you know, the services that are available and that they qualify for.
Hey, Amy, would it be okay if on the hot topics, we're going to address those in a little bit more detail further down the agenda?
Okay, great. Yeah. And then just I thought when we had talked about, the last thing I just wanted to just sort of emphasize is when we discussed doing like a pilot program with pods, and I know that we had, you know, mentioned about the area between Department of Human Services and the courthouse. And I thought, you know, maybe it would be a good idea for every jurisdiction that is involved and wants to be involved, that they identify a location within their jurisdiction that they would be willing, you know, to put up these temporary pods. So I just think it's something that for us all to come to the table with and see what everybody's willing to do. And then the last thing, and I don't know if anybody's speaking about this, but looking at the Ready to Work program, there's the Aurora and Boulder model. That their program may not be perfect, but I mean, they're boasting I think it was a 74% success rate with taking someone that was homeless and getting them working in housing and sober. And I think that's tremendous. Next slide, please. And that's it. So does anyone have any questions about anything that I covered?
No, but it looks like Susie Miller from 80 Works said they're opening up a Ready to Work program in Littleton. So it won't just be in Aurora.
Oh, wonderful.
Could I ask a question? Terrence Quinn, Community Development. Hey, Amy, how you doing? Are you basically telling us that in our parks and on the other properties that we're, you know, they're not open for public access, but we can't stop people from camping there? Is that what you're saying? I'm just need clarification on that.
Terrence, let me jump in on that.
Okay, thanks, Lance.
So there's different and conflicting laws that apply to that issue. So Counties and other public entities can put up signage on any county or public-owned property that has restrictions, and those statutes explicitly allow prohibiting camping. Now, that said, if there is absolutely nowhere for someone to go, you run into problems with constitutional law and other factors that come into play. And so, yes, you can restrict your publicly owned property from camping, but there are limitations on how you enforce that. So it depends is the big picture, but there's different factors that come into play on the legal side.
So the regulations are kind of.
Well, they're not useless, they're not irrelevant, but we do need to consider all of the elements. I mean, prohibiting camping is one element, but it's not everything. There was discussion of services. How do you get someone into services? How do you locate available beds? So there's other factors to consider, but if there's absolutely nowhere for someone to go, you can't simply enforce a camping ban and call it good. There are legal risks to that approach.
What
And
constitutes?
Lance, if I could add, the case law that came out on that is essentially, if you did try to enforce it and it went to court, it should be dismissed. I mean, it shouldn't even get to court. If you can't show that there were beds available or there was shelter available.
So we're liable for them if they're on the property camping and there's no place for them to go?
Potentially, there's a lot of factors that come into play, Terrence, but potentially, yes.
So my question was gonna be, what constitutes a place for them to go? Is it an open bed in a shelter? Is it a hotel room? Is it what? I mean, how can you say that there's no place for them to go? What defines that?
It's not me saying that. Amy, have you done that research? Have the courts clearly defined what a place to go looks like?
Yes, I have. So it would be on us to show that, so the case that I'm thinking of, the county was arguing that this gentleman was voluntarily homeless because he owned his car and he could drive, to a different jurisdiction. He could go here. There was a homeless shelter in a different one county over that had availability, but that particular county didn't have both of their shelters were full, 100% capacity. And so the court said, no, it doesn't matter. It's not on him to have to go somewhere else. If you don't have, all I have to know is where their beds available, and there weren't in the shelter. And so I think for our county, we don't even have any, we're not even working with having shelter options. And so I think that, as Lance said, then that we are at risk for trying to enforce someone to move. So I don't know if that answered your question. The court didn't want to come down and say exactly didn't want to define what voluntary was or involuntary homeless, but it did say where it drew the line was either there are beds available within your county or they're not. That's what they said.
So I just want to be clear that that's the purpose of this meeting and this initiative is to figure out how to achieve that. So I don't want to jump too far ahead in, I think all of the municipalities in the county know we can't enforce a camping ban without having an option. And we've been directed by Commissioner Layden to figure out what that option is. So we are looking at sheltering options that could include up to not just hotels and motels, but a shelter option. And so we're early in the exploration of that, but we know that we can't have law enforcement enforce camping bans without some place for someone to be able to move to. So I don't want to get too far mired in this. We know that, but we wanted to make sure that everybody else knew that as well, that we can't expect the police to enforce something without some place to go. And the county feels like it's our responsibility to figure out the sheltering option. So I just want to be super clear about that so we don't get too far into this.
If I could follow up on that then, so you're probably also going to talk about when somebody of one end of the county without a car is found, how do you get them to those services? Or does it even count? You know, if it's too far to go by foot, you know, do we have to, so you'll be exploring those kind of things too.
I'll just have a point. Amy, thank you for the presentation, your research. I really appreciate it, and Lance as well. I think the perspective we all share in this room is nobody wants to criminalize the homeless. And we don't want to add an additional burden to our wonderful members of law enforcement and create more for them to do. That said, having code enforcement that reflects the values of our community, littering is still illegal, vandalism is still illegal. You can't go through 6 lanes of traffic with a baby. That triggers a human services issue. And what we've been told by council, if I could encapsulate it, is that the county does have the ability to have camping restrictions and signage. We've done that for a long time. And certainly our municipalities will share more about what they're able to do by law. But leading with compassion, the idea is not to criminalize or put people in jail that are facing a housing crisis. I think there's more discussion today about what that might look like, consistent with models that have been successful in the past.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to clarify a couple of things about the homeless management information system. So MDHI oversees that for our 7-county Metro Denver region. And just a couple of things. So we are at a point where we have like an inventory count of beds. They're not updated daily. Does that make sense? I just want to like set that, like, so people don't have that expectation. Could we move in that direction? Absolutely. Like, I think that's kind of, first it was getting shelter beds into HMIS and then moving forward. And then the other thing is that Boulder does use the homeless management information system, particularly those those organizations and programs that are required to by federal law because they receive federal funding. They also use something that is HUD compliant called Boulder County Connects. And what we did was just a data share agreement so that their staff now isn't having to double enter data. So just wanted to like clarify that so that the systems are not talking to each other.
We've explored Boulder Connects in a lot of our different programs because the way Boulder operates all of their health and human services program is they are under one complete management system so that a user can see what they're utilizing and also providers in the government can see what is being utilized. And it's a HIPAA compliant, actually. They moved it off of the county servers and it's actually a really good program.
It's really robust in that you can see kind of this, you know, the whole picture, right? And so we've worked really hard. It took us 3 years, but we did it. And now have the two systems talking to each other. So it is used in Boulder.
I believe it's been since about 2013, 14, since anybody in Douglas County is using that, primarily because the funding source that was attached to the required use of that service was no longer being used by that agency. And so because we don't have anybody that's required to use HMIS because there's no funding attached to it, we have not. So it's that's why currently there's no requirement for anybody to use it inside of Douglas County. So we're not receiving any funding. And again, it was before your time. I think it was by 2013, 2014 that they lost the funding associated from HUD that required that system. So it was just Help and Hope at the time back then. So.
And just from that perspective, from the case manager's perspective, that system's a nightmare.
The
So
old
The old one was,
Yeah, we've got a brand new one in 2018 that is, we have really good results and really good feedback, and we'd be happy to create a sandbox. Yeah.
Jamie,
Coming our way.
we, does anyone else use Boulder Connect or is it just Boulder County?
Just Boulder.
It's just Boulder. It's like a system they set up themselves. Yeah.
Do you
Jefferson
have,
County has moved somewhat into it, but not the full picture.
And we do have one online question as well, if we could move to that. Luke, can you?
Yeah, this question is from Julia Mecklenburg. What are the requirements on the county to get people to shelters or beds? Is it just that they are available, or are there additional requirements to support people to access them?
Well, you can't, I mean, what we know is you can't, to Terrence's question, we can't expect someone from Highlands Ranch to walk to Castle Rock if that's the only shelter bed. So there would have to be some sort of ability for them to get to where they're going. And that's another part of this that we'll be working out.
Right, yeah. Transportation is definitely an issue. We understand that and recognize that and realize that we'll probably have to put a patchwork of services together to be able to achieve that. So is that that's the only question online. So I think we're, in the interest of time, we're gonna move on, to the Douglas County Sheriff's Office and Chief Doug.
Thanks. So first of all, I want to start off with a little positive news that a lot of people in this room may not recognize. But I'm telling you, I've been in this job a long, long time. But one of the things that we're the most fortunate on is in this county, we have 4 law enforcement agencies who work and collaborate together daily. We have a partnership. We're not siloed like a lot of counties are. And that's because of the leadership of those 4 agencies, and the leaders that are involved that have our 4 agencies work together. So we're very lucky that way. And so we're positive, we're moving in a positive direction because of that, because the 4 agencies talk to each other on a daily basis. As you can see that here. So I just wanted to give you guys a snapshot of what's going on in unincorporated Douglas County. So I ran some numbers. I've been tracking this for about the past 6 months. The county deals with 2 different areas. We have our patrol officers who are dealing with the homeless people that they're coming in contact with, but we also have our jail. In our jail in the 2021, we had 347 inmates come into our jail that were homeless and leave our jail homeless. 277 of those were not from Douglas County. So that's 80% of the homeless population that comes into our jail are not Douglas County residents. 20% are, but 70 were from Douglas County. So far this year, we've had 107 inmates come into the jail that were homeless. 89 were not from Douglas County. So it's gone up. 83% of the inmates that have come in or the prisoners that have come in are not from Douglas County. Only 18 are. And if our numbers in the first quarter keep going at this rate, we're going to surpass the number of homeless people that have come through our jail in 2022. And I'll talk about jail population here in a little bit because that's something that we always have to consider. In patrol, I started tracking this in August. So last year, patrol officers, we had 117 homeless contacts by our patrol officers. 106 of those were not from Douglas County. These were homeless people that have come in from Douglas County. It's the thing I've been watching for years with the camping bans and the sweeps that have been done through in the bigger cities. I've always watched that on television. And I'm like, where do they think they're going? And they've literally thrown a grenade into the middle of this and scattered them everywhere because they had no plan in place. So the suburbs and the surrounding counties and jurisdictions are now having to deal with what's gone on in the Colorado Springs, Aurora, and Denver area. This year, in the first quarter, we've had 63 contacts with homeless people. 60 of them were not from Douglas County. So 95% of our contacts so far this year are not Douglas County residents. We've only had 3 homeless people from Douglas County. And just to give you an idea of how these calls are coming into us, 108 of these calls, or 88%, were being dispatched. Someone is calling us to report an issue. Most of the calls are either a suspicious person or a welfare check. We have a very compassionate and empathetic citizen base. They are concerned about these people. They don't want to see anybody getting hurt. And they're seeing somebody and they call us and they're like, hey, I see this person, he's sleeping on the sidewalk. He hasn't moved in 15 minutes. Can please somebody go check him? So almost 87% of our calls are either suspicious persons or welfare checks. 19 of them are calls for unwanted subjects. And those are people that have usually come into a business and are refusing to leave. They call us up and say, hey, this person's been at the Starbucks or in this gas station or at the fast food restaurant, and we've asked them to leave and they won't leave. So we come out there. Now, only 12 of our calls involved a crime that was being committed. Usually it's trespass. Sometimes it's harassment, to where they called, they talked to this person, the person gets froggy with them, they start coming back at them. So our officers go out. But I will tell you, almost on every one of these calls, an arrest was not made. And why? Because the person who called us don't want anybody to go into jail. That's the first thing they tell us. I don't want to get anybody in trouble. I don't want anybody going to jail. Can you just please ask them to leave, right? We even had one fast food place where the guy was crashed out in front of the drive-through, waiting for the drive-through to open. He refused to leave. The manager comes out, we come out, we're talking to him. The manager looks at him and he goes, what would it take for you just to please leave my drive-through? And the guy goes, I'm hungry. He got a bag full of hamburgers, and then we gave him a courtesy ride to the RTD, and he's driving back to Denver with a bag full of Wendy's hamburgers. So it's things like that. But that trespass letter comes into play a lot. Will be coming into play a lot in the future, because a lot of times the managers that are calling us don't have the authority to press a charge. They have to call corporate to get permission, and they just don't do that, which I understand. So that's kind of what is going on. The other interesting piece, I just want to stress again, we hear a lot of talk about panhandlers. First of all, panhandling is not illegal. We're not committing a crime. Our panhandlers in Douglas County, at least in unincorporated, it's almost like that's their job, right? They do not cause us any problems. We've only been called twice on a panhandler, right? And both times involved kids. They weren't calling because they were panhandling. They were calling because there's a little kid next to them. And they were more concerned about the kid than they were about panhandling. We go out there, we have a great partnership with the Department of Human Services. We immediately coordinate with them to make sure that the child is safe and take necessary steps. We're not getting a lot of calls from the citizens. Our citizens aren't in an uproar about the panhandling. It's out there. Our panhandlers, at least what we see in Douglas County, are very, they're respectful. They understand the rules. They can't step on the roadway. They can't bother the moving traffic. They can't harass people at their car. You guys have all seen them. They'll start at the bottom of the off ramp. The cars will all stop. They'll work their way up the sidewalk. And as soon as the light changes, the cars take off. They turn around, they go back to the bottom, and they just keep doing that. My issue, I have a panhandling. I like the idea about signs and educating our public. One of the problems we have when we're talking to our people that are panhandling is they like Douglas County because we're a very generous county. It is not unusual for somebody to stop and hand somebody a $20 bill, right? So they make a lot of coin panhandling here in Douglas County versus the very little that they're getting in some of the other areas, because we have a very generous, very empathetic county. So that's kind of what's going on in Douglas County.
Can you real quick, I talked to you about this earlier this week. Can you say where in the county you're and what times?
Sure.
I thought that was really interesting.
I ran all the numbers. 75 or 61% of all our homeless contacts are up in Highlands Ranch. 20% are in the unincorporated areas, or I'm sorry, 16% are in the unincorporated areas of Lone Tree. 7% are in the unincorporated areas in Castle Rock, and then 5% are in the area of Castle Pines. We've only had 2 homeless calls of an actual homeless person going into the city of Castle Pines. Most of the times our contacts on call, they're in the area of, which means they're on the frontage roads on either side of the highway, or actually on the highway. Then we've had a few in the unincorporated area of Parker, a few in the unincorporated area of Littleton. We had 2 down in Franktown, 2 in Larkspur, 1 in Sterling Ranch. So the majority of our population lives up in Highlands Ranch. Almost 62% of the entire county's population, unincorporated, lives in the little tiny area between Highway 85 and east of I-25, about 4 or 5 miles back, which is our districts 1, 12, 2, 3, and 4. So that's where we're contacting most of our homes, is up in the Highlands Ranch. Running our times, I ran a heat map yesterday. Almost 71% of all our contacts are on Sunday through Wednesday. That's our hot times. And it's usually between 7:30 in the morning and 3:30 in the afternoon is when we're getting called the most. We're not getting a lot of calls at night. We have a very big county, so some of the calls are scattered and spread out. We get a few calls in their graveyard shift and our swing shift, but most of our calls are Sunday through Wednesday, which is our A side, on our day shift. Does that answer that question, Dan?
Yes, it's perfect. Thank you.
Dan, Chief Duffy.
Lieutenant, whatever you are.
You promoted me in every meeting.
Program, Chief Duffy. When we were talking earlier this week, you also mentioned that it's your impression that most of the people that are panhandling are not homeless.
That's correct. Yeah, we've talked to a lot of them because we've asked them. One of the things that I did about 8 months ago is my patrolmen go out and start actually contacting the homeless and talking to them, find out where they came from, find out what they need. Because some of the times I have a feeling that even groups like us, we sit around and we just jump to the assumptions of what the homeless people actually need. Very rarely do they ask for shelter. That's one of the things that what we're seeing, the biggest thing we're seeing is they're actually fleeing the shelters. They don't want to go to the shelters in Denver because it's dangerous. So they are trying to get out of the shelters. A lot of them, want to stay on the street. Obviously, water, food, clothing, that's the basics of what they're asking for. Our panhandlers, when we're talking to them, we always ask them the same thing. What do you need? What can we get you? Can we take you anywhere? We're always offering rides. No, I'm good. My car's right over there and I live in Littleton. I'm staying at a hotel in Arapahoe County. They're not homeless. So we don't classify them as homeless. Does that make sense? Now talking about this meeting here, I looked into it. In 2002, the county passed the ordinance that Amy was talking about, the panhandling. Our county attorney, rightly so, basically advised us, stop enforcing that ordinance. It's not enforceable. So we've only written that citations for that ordinance 36 times. And 29 of those were in 2015, 2016 that we pretty much stopped. So we have a county ordinance, but we don't enforce the county ordinance because based on county attorneys' rulings, and they're the ones who give us, they kind of direct us on what to do. We don't enforce that ordinance, but it's still on the books. But I think we could look at maybe tweaking it, like Amy said. We don't have a camping ban. Obviously, that's been discussed. We don't have a camping ban here in Douglas County. But what we do have, understand law enforcement, kind of going to, we enforce CRS. We enforce the Colorado Revised Statutes. Obviously, the biggest statutes that we come across the most that are the easiest to enforce are the harassments, the assaults, the thefts. But like I said earlier, very rarely are we being called to those type of crimes. We do have on the books a CRS for second-degree trespassing, where it's unlawful person to enter or remain on the common area of a hotel, motel, condominium, or apartment building. That's a class 3 misdemeanor. But again, you have to have somebody that's willing to actually file the complaint. Most of the desk managers that call us because they've found someone sleeping on the stairwell or something like that, they don't have the authority to tell us to charge that person. So they just want to, can you just ask them to leave? And almost, well, every time they've left. We've gone, we've talked to them, and we've left. And they've left voluntarily. A lot of times we've given them courtesy rides. because they wanted to go back up to Denver or they wanted to go somewhere else. So we'll take them to the light rail and off they go. We do have a statute, failure or refusal to leave upon request of a peace officer. So if we go there, we ask them to leave, we're justified in asking them to leave this private property and they refuse. We do have a statute to where we can charge them. We haven't ever had to use it. And then talking about camping, there is a statute, unlawful conduct on public property, that goes to our parks. That is where it's unauthorized. It basically says in the statute, you can't camp or picnic in a public area that's strictly prohibited. So it's, we don't see, you know, when we talk about encampments, we don't see that in unincorporated Douglas County. I'll let these guys speak to what they're seeing in the cities. We'll come across one or two every now and then have thrown up a pup tent or something like that, but we're not seeing the encampments like you're seeing on television. I think we will, now that the weather's getting warmer, we'll see that in our green belts, we'll see that in our open space and our parks and those type of places. So I want to talk about some of the pain points or what they determine as pain points. First of all, it said here, and Sheriff Spurlock stresses this to us all the time, being homeless is not a crime. It's not illegal to be a homeless person. So don't treat them like criminals. And that's one of the things that we've stressed high. Our biggest pain point in this county is RTD. That's how they get here, and that's how we're using them to get out of here. And RTD has zero enforcement going on their trains. These homeless people are riding the trains and riding the buses. Almost 45% of all the homeless people we've come in contact with that were not from Douglas County, how did you get here? I took the light rail or I took the bus. And that's all they do. And our northern agencies have figured this out. They've timed a lot of this because those trains stop at 11 p.m. Throw somebody on a train heading south at 10:15. They're going to get to the end of the rail and then the train stops and they're stuck in Lone Tree. Happens every day. And then the buses don't run here on a coordinated effort. So we find a lot of our homeless up right by our substation, up in Highlands Ranch, sleeping by the bus stop, waiting for a bus so they can get back to Denver. So RTD is the number one problem that we have. The other thing that we have is, we've talked a little bit about, we don't really have a lot of resources for law enforcement when we're dealing with the homeless. We don't have any place to take them, other than that's why RTD is being abused. It is really our only option of, where do you want to go? We'll take you anywhere you want to go with limits, because we don't want to lose our district cars. So a lot of times, I want to go back up to Denver. All right, let's take you to the closest light rail. We'll drive them up to the mineral station. We'll drive them over to the light rail station, up and off they go. Our officers are pulling a lot of cash out of their pockets because they don't just throw them on the train. They actually buy them tickets. So that's one of the biggest problems that law enforcement has is we don't have a lot of resources to go out there. So they're kind of making this stuff up on the sly of how to deal with homeless. Like I already covered it, our largest area of coverage is Highlands Ranch. The other issue that's bothersome to me, and this goes back to the jail, our jail population is as high today as it's ever been since the jail was built. Now, it's not a population like you see in Denver, Arapahoe, or Jefferson County. We're running an average daily population of between 425 to 450. I just want to stress this. We cannot arrest our way out of this problem and just start throwing people in jail for infractions or ordinance violations. We don't have the room in our jail to do this. And it's just going to bugger up the courts. And the district attorney, they're pleading cases out and releasing people as fast as they can because the courts can't handle what's coming through with the criminal, yet alone we start throwing a bunch of homeless cases in front of them.
If I could also add, when they get out of jail, they're staying in Castle Rock many times.
That's a very good point. One of the things that is probably one of the biggest frustrations to me, Castle Rock PD pointed out to us, we, law enforcement, have caused, I think, some of the biggest issues in Castle Rock, the city of, because we arrest people when they have a warrant. From Jefferson County, from Denver, from Aurora. We arrest them because the warrant's in there. We bring them to our jail. The way it's always worked in the past, pre-COVID, was then the home agency that wrote that warrant is supposed to then come get them and take them back up to their jail and get them through the court system. All the other counties are refusing to come get their inmates. So they sit in our jail. We can't hold them legally because it's not our warrant. It's in another jurisdiction. We have to let them go. So what do? We let them go. There's no way for them to get from Castle Rock out of the county, so they become Castle Rock homeless. Our captain in the jail has even gone as far with these inmates that are being released, saying, where do you want to go? We'll take you anywhere you want to go. We'll drive you up to Denver. We'll drive you to Jefferson County. Nah, I kind of like Castle Rock. I think I'm going to stay here, right? We can't force them in the car, right? But it's caused a problem for Castle Rock. And we have been fighting with these jails. I'll give you the biggest pain point I have is Arapahoe County's jail, and I'm not here to just trash, but Arapahoe County's jail has taken the COVID protocol to where, well, they have to stay in your jail for 12 days until you prove that they don't have COVID, right? Then we'll come get them. But only if their bond is over $1,200. A lot of times these bonds are $500 or $1,000. So they put a bond limit on it. And they put this 12-day, well, most of the warrants that these people have are so minor, the judges would look at them and say, time served, you're free to go. So again, our legal system, our law enforcement county jails are part of the problem. Our jail has never shut down. We never stopped with COVID. We just managed. A lot of the jails literally shut down. The other area that we're running to is warrants. 59 of our homeless that we've contacted in the last 6 months had warrants. They had warrants from outside the jurisdiction. They weren't our warrants. They were somewhere else. The way it works is you call up that jurisdiction and say, hey, we've got John Q here. He's got a warrant. Will you confirm it? Right? Because you can't arrest them until that warrant's confirmed. And they refuse to confirm the warrant. So we have to let them go, even though they have a warrant. Or they put, Denver's notorious for this, they put limited extradition. The warrant's only valid in the city of Denver. You get contacted in Douglas County, that warrant's no good. So a lot of only 6 of the warrants that we've come across we could arrest them for. So again, it's that game that's being played and everybody keeps, it's about COVID or it's about jail population stuff. It's a problem. And it's a problem that is impacting us here in Douglas County.
If it's okay, I think we probably need to
Yep.
move along. So if there are other summary main points you have?
Nope.
Okay.
I've got we're going to talk about more about some of the resources, so I'm good.
Very good. Okay, I just want to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to ask the chief questions if there are questions. I'm not seeing any, so I think we're going to move on to, oh
I'm
yes.
sorry, Jen. Chief Duffy, it's Amy. What is the how many inmates can the jail hold? I'm just curious.
The way the jail was built, it's a pod system. The jail can hold up to 500 inmates. Jail standards is you never want to go over 80% of capacity to run a safe jail, but we can hold up to 500. We can actually, with sled beds and stuff, hold up to 600.
Thank you.
Okay, so we are going to move on to the town of Castle Rock and Chief Polly. I know we have some slides. We're going to bring those up for you.
So in the interest of time, I'm not gonna go over some of what the Chief Deputy's already talked about and what Amy had already talked about. The next slide, please. So as far as ordinances are concerned, you've heard the issues and the concerns about the district court ruling. So our town attorney's office is looking at our ordinances as it pertains to any type of homeless situation, and they're reviewing those right now to make sure that they're constitutional and look at the enforceability of that. So that's the process we're in right now. Next slide, please. So as far as challenges that we have, we've received about 510 calls where the caller mentioned the word homeless, transient, unhoused during 2021. So that's an increase over prior years. Doesn't mean that's how many people we have, obviously, in town that are unhoused, but it's just how many calls came in with that statement. So we have concerns about trash and public intoxication, waterways. We have the creeks. So that's a concern about us. And then some camps that we've seen along Plum Creek trailway system. So this requires resources, obviously, from our police department as well as our public works and our parks department as we address those types of issues. The town's parks has helped clean up some of these camps that we have found to be abandoned. So that's, again, it's a resource issue for us. Typically, it would be one of our community partnership unit officers, along with our parks department, to go to clean up these abandoned campsites. And they're not, our parks department isn't specifically trained on how to handle and clean up some of these sites. As you know, there's sometimes they find illegal drugs or syringes or other dangerous items. So that is a very much a concern that I'll talk about later on how we're addressing that. Next slide, please. We do not currently have funding available to provide for shelter or housing or other resources from the town. We do know that there are nonprofits, and our community partnership unit officer, Sergeant Torrance, and his team go out and they talk to the individuals that we come in contact with, and we give them the information regarding the resources that are available in town and throughout the county. If it's something that they need, we make sure that we hook them up with that and that they can have those resources available to them. The town is seeking a coordinated approach with other Douglas County jurisdictions. Like Chief Duffy mentioned, that we are very much a collaborative type of team here, and that's very important. We know that none of us can tackle these challenges by ourselves, and that's why this group exists. So we do feel that this has to be a collaborative effort. The town is interested in the code provisions to restrict camping in the vicinity of the public waterways. So we're looking at what does that look like? How can we do that? So we're compassionate, but also protecting the waterways because we know how important water is to all of us. And we intend to contract with a third party regarding the cleanup of some of the campsites, because we're finding that's probably the most safe way and effective way to do this, as opposed to specifically having our parks staff do that. So that's something that we're in talks with right now with a third party to have that contracted out. Next slide. That's all I have.
Any questions for Chief Colley? Not seeing anything from Luke online. So thank you for that. I think we will move on to Commander Beals from City of Lone Tree.
Thanks, Jen. Again, to avoid some redundancy, Chief Duffy did a great job of giving an overview here. I will reiterate the fact that we are trying very hard to work with RTD. We haven't seen a lot of information come from them that gives us a lot of encouragement that anything's going to change there anytime soon, but we did meet with their interim chief. And also, if you were here at last month's meeting, you saw that they've hired this homeless case manager. His name is Alton. He did mention this app that might be able to show in real time where beds are available. Again, just to reiterate, we know our beds are not in Douglas County. They're somewhere else. So we'd have to partner, at least I'm anticipating a couple of years before something actually was real time here in Douglas County to make that happen.
And Commander Beals, that homeless navigator for RTD, there's one of those for the entire transit system, or is there more than that?
I believe there's one.
I believe there is one.
Yes.
I think that's important when they came here last month and said, we have this resource. That resource goes to Boulder, in Denver, Union Station, where the hottest bed of that activity is. I think it's important to say there's only one of those regions. You might be the best navigator in the world, but there's only one of them.
Well, and I would just add that the meeting with RTD, I guess I'll sum it up this way. They don't have any plan whatsoever. That would be my, based on our conversation, there's no plan really on how they're gonna increase their enforcement presence. This year, they've hired 2 people. A few years ago, before COVID, their plan was to have a 200+ law enforcement arm for RTD. And they've made no progress whatsoever. They got about 20 officers right now. 6 of those are administrative. So that doesn't leave you a whole lot of enforcement on the line. And then their security staff is also down about 50 security people. So they're, as far as enforcement and how the RTD line is being managed is pretty sparse right now. Didn't really get a sense they had any real plan on how they're going to improve that.
Greetings. This is Alton. How are you doing today? I wanted to just chime in. I realized that during our meeting, we were still working on some changes at RTD in regards to police officers on the field who can join me to help out with Douglas County. We are restructuring, and I do plan on being down there more often, and hopefully, as I mentioned before, we can be there more often, and a plan to have maybe either a shelter or something in terms of the OWL network where we can have someone get down there before it gets to like 10:15, and you have persons floating around who are more than likely to need to find shelter. This is just Alton from the RTD Navigation Group.
All right, thanks, Alton. Just moving forward, we do have kind of a model where we have our day shift teams reaching out to our homeless camps where we know they are regularly. We have created a document that's approximately 13 pages long that has all kinds of different resources on there, from places they can stay to places they can get food, to get socks, to whatever the case might be. Our experience generally is, hey, here's a list of these resources, and they're like, thanks, but no thanks. Again, the problem generally isn't those folks who really do want to improve their situation. It's the folks that have no desire to improve their situation. So, but it's not that we're not trying to. One of the things we've also done recently is reached out to our city prosecutor. Again, we will reemphasize the point, we are not going to arrest our way out of the situation, but there are things that we can do to help ourselves. And then I'll talk about what Amy brought up earlier about this median safety ordinance that she referenced. But our city prosecutor did say that she will have an appetite to enforce some of these regular laws that we can all enforce when it comes to the littering, the public urination, defecation, the destruction of property. We've had a little bit more of a call for service on our medians with some of our homeless people fighting each other or aggressively talking to our drivers. We also can enforce them impeding traffic. We are seeing quite a bit of drug activity. We see a lot of needles at these sites. We have partnered with, for our parks and open space areas, South Suburban Parks and Rec, their rangers are certified to clean up hazardous materials. So they are cleaning up camps as they can. That comes with a notice. We don't just go in there, clean up the camp and tell them they have to go. We have to give them 48 hours notice. Hey, in 48 hours, we're coming back. We're going to clean up the site. Any items of value determined by South Suburban have to be kept in a locker for at least 15 days, and a sign has to be left on scene. If you have items here that we now have in possession, you have 15 days to come get them. So we've worked through some of the legality of how we can clean up those sites and still allow folks to have access to their items we might have confiscated. One of the things that we are just starting to get traction on is with our building and planning division is having them review site plans for businesses that have come into the city. And we, like Chief Duffy said, have a lot of businesses who are sympathetic and will, I don't care if the guy sleeps behind my sign overnight. He's not hurting me. He can come in the morning and get a free cup of coffee. Well, their site improvement plan actually does not allow them to have people on their property overnight. So now we're educating our businesses, you actually can't do that. And again, we're not out here to arrest them. We'd rather educate them and give them services and get them on their way. But we also want to hold our businesses accountable for contributing to the problem. So we're looking at going at it from that way. We are also doing the trespass notices. Our community partnership unit goes out and visits our businesses annually. I think Amy made mention that the county's doing it every 2 years. I'd like to move to 2 years. Annually is a little labor intensive, so maybe we can look at doing that every 2 years. But we are asking these businesses to sign off on these trespass letters so we also can enforce trespassing. I think that's probably everything I have that's new to what we've already discussed. I can't tell you, just this morning when the chief and I were driving here, 7-Eleven called and said, hey, there's a guy who's homeless. He's been in my bathroom for 2 hours. He refuses to leave. So now we've got 3 officers out there trying to convince this guy to leave. And he had 4 warrants, so he's probably in your jail now.
If they got confirmed.
One of them was your warrant, so.
There it is. Yeah.
Any questions for me?
Let me just add to the so we do have a median safety ordinance, so.
Oh, median safety ordinance.
5 years ago when I got here, we had a panhandling ordinance that, because I came from the Springs, I knew it was unenforceable, so we got that taken off our books, and we really just focus on behavior. So as long as the behavior is appropriate, then we typically aren't gonna do anything about the panhandling, even though we still get calls about it. I'd say the biggest issue is littering. You know, someone panhandles on, say, Lincoln and I-25, and after a day, there's just trash all over the place. So that's one issue we're trying to deal with. But the median safety ordinance, we did actually partner with our public works. They went out, they did traffic flow rates on major thoroughfares, and it's coupled with how much volume of traffic, width of the median. And so I think ours it's less than 4 or 6, I forget, but then we have about 25 medians within the city that you're not allowed to panhandle at. I don't think we've ever written that ticket. We just go out, explain to them you're not allowed to panhandle here, here's why. And then they go over to the side of the road where they can on the sidewalk or what have you. But I do think that's a good method, is to get the median safety. You just need to have the data to show here's why that's dangerous to be out here in the middle of the roadway. And then it's pretty easy to enforce after that. Thanks.
It's good to hear. I think a lot of good conversation and that I did not realize. So good to hear from you all. Any other questions for Lone Tree?
I do have one comment I wanted to make too, is, you know, it was mentioned about our co-responder teams. Our co-response team right now, our CRT program, run through with the 4 jurisdictions. Lone Tree's team is going to come on board here pretty quick. Then we'll have a CRT team in every jurisdiction. Those are there to handle mental health crisis calls. They're not homeless call people. And in all of our situations, we've only had to call our CRT team over twice to help de-escalate a situation with a homeless individual that was clearly having a mental health crisis. Our officers are all trained in crisis intervention training, so they're able to de-escalate situations. They really don't need the CRT and the mental health person coming over, but they're there if there need be. But I just want to make very clear that we never want to get these 2 issues commingled to where we lose what we built with our CRT program. So
I would say though that we're seeing something a little different in Lone Tree.
Sure.
So we started tracking transients and mental health calls, and about half our mental health calls are transient. Yeah. And so we are seeing a lot of really aggressive behavior, a lot of times on an RTD platform or at the mall. We've had some very significant issues that have happened there. One of our officers got their leg broke a month ago, fighting with a homeless person who has a mental health issue, and that person already assaulted another transient. So we're seeing a lot more aggressive behavior with some of the transients we're dealing with. They're going into Skyridge Medical Center and causing problems there. So we're definitely seeing a little bit different, I think. And I think it's primarily because they're just coming off the RTD line, and they're not going anywhere. They're just causing issues right there on the platforms, and they're threatening drivers on RTD line, which I know RTD is concerned about as well. So those we're seeing a little bit different, I think.
And we're seeing I have seen it definitely
Let's
increase.
have the discussion about the co-responder team, because I think what you're not getting is phone calls from citizens that just want to criminalize people. I think you're right. Our citizens are very generous. They're respectful. They don't want to see people thrown in jail, but they're upset about it. And every elected official in here can speak to you as to how many citizens we hear from that have had it. I see Tim Dietz already, probably with a full soapbox ready to go. But with the co-response team, if you have trained individuals that are not going to criminalize the homeless population, but can transport them to services, and if we have services in the county that are appropriate, that could be a really significant solution. So I want to get to that before we shoot it down.
Well, just understand, Commissioner, that the co-response teams, this law enforcement team, and one of the things when we built CRT is each individual agency can run their team the way that works best for their area, but they do report to the head of the law enforcement agency. And so, speaking for Sheriff Spurlock makes the decision on how his CRT teams are used.
Can I weigh on this real quick? 'Cause I agree with Chief Wilson, is that we're seeing mental health and homeless, there's a connection there many times. So having a co-responder team help with the homeless, I don't think it's a bad idea. And it's actually something that we're looking at, but we definitely need more resources. And there's a difference between having an officer at CIT certified, which is great. And our goal is to have 100% of our officers be CIT certified. We send as many as we possibly can, and it makes a difference. But for example, Dave Moorhead's one of our community partnership getting officers. He's CIT certified. We have a patrol officer that's CIT certified. Dave's going to have more experience dealing with these types of situations. He has more time. He knows where the resources are. And if he's working with a clinician, that's even better. So I don't think there's just this separation, at least we're seeing in Castle Rock, that maybe Chief Deputy's seeing. We definitely are seeing a connection there.
I think that, so just a real quick, I'll jump ahead on the agenda before Chief Serapis goes. We're looking at writing a proposal to the board to fund what we would call a navigator or an outreach person. In the thought of it is currently that we would ask all 4 law enforcement jurisdictions to allow this person to ride with whoever in a district bar to do outreach, to do community. What services are you in need of? Can we help you get there? To start to see what this could look like. The CRT team started as a pilot as well, and they grew. So the county is looking at hiring that person. We're starting to write the proposal tomorrow. Actually, as one of our immediate tangible responses to this, to all the chief's points, there still isn't a place for them to go. So we do want to start hiring and educate our staff. Like the cities have outreach teams that are more educated in both the mental health, but also in people who are experiencing homelessness. We don't have that in Douglas County today. So I think it's going to be a hybrid of what everybody's saying. It's still really early. So before we get too far, we wanted to talk to all of you guys about what it could look like. Yes, boss.
I just want to clarify that I think what's important is that we coordinate all these efforts together. In other words, if we have a navigator, they would still work with all of our community response teams, which, by the way, our model has a case manager associated with each team and fire EMS, it can be called, like if you have somebody who appears that they're, passed out on the sidewalk. So I don't think we're suggesting that we're not going to deal with the mental health side for people that have a mental health issue, but that we need to coordinate all the investment that we've made already in our community in these teams and bring this additional element to it, but also use the resources that we have developed, not only through our CRT program, we also have an intensive case management program that we've developed called the Care Compact. It's working with people with very significant mental health needs and we've got 11 community partners, including our area hospitals. And so we just want to build on the things that we've already developed in our community. And our co-responder model is a little bit different than some of the other municipalities and the other counties, in that we're covering the whole county. We're working right now to expand so I just think, to make it clear, it's not an either or. It's really a both and, to build on what we already have developed and are investing in as a county.
And not to beat a horse to death, but I also appreciate what Chief Duffy's saying, and that is, if we take our CRT teams though and direct them too much at the homeless, that's all they're going to be doing. And so I really think we're going to need both. We're going to need, whether you want to call them a hot team or whatever you want to call them, but we need homeless outreach teams, and to help keep the CRT teams free. But I know in Lone Tree, when we set ours up, they're going to spend some time with some transient homeless folks, just because we run into so many of them literally with acute issues or in crisis at that moment, and they're probably going to end up having to work a lot on that. But at the same time, I think we need to figure out a way to have both. You know, we need to create other teams to focus on homeless. And actually, I like what Chief Duffy said. We need to be reaching out to them, talking to them, getting to know them. What do they need? What's their history? To try to get them to a pathway to be not homeless anymore. And I mean, that's really got to be the goal.
And that's the goal of this person. Like I said, it will likely need to have more than one person, but we thought we would start just like we did with the CRT team, small and then grow. But the county is invested in doing that soon.
And I think getting to that point where we understand who the people are, what their issues are, understanding that more will be that job really of that that person who's designated to do this. And yes, we start small and we add to it as we need to, but we'll start to develop that data. We'll start to develop a better, stronger understanding. So we're so happy to hear that it sounds like you all support that.
Well, one of the things that our partnership does, and because it's a smaller area, we don't have the area that the county does, they're out there every week contacting the folks. So we know who they are. We've contacted them several times. We've offered them services. So we know exactly who they are, what they need, why they're there. And, we keep up on that. So, if somebody else new comes, and we contact them as well. So, when that person comes on board, we're happy to help with that, because we already have them cataloged and where they are. And it's important, because that way they know us, we know them, which is why it's important. And it works really well when officers like Moorhead can go out there and he already has a report with them. Hey, got a call. What's going on? What's changed? That type of thing.
So I'm hearing from you guys, we might need to ask for more than one. I'm hearing that loud. I got the nuts, Chief. I got the nuts.
I'll take one.
I'll take two. I know. So stay tuned, but that is in the works. And Commissioner Layton has empowered this team, and then directed by our county manager, Doug DeBoer, they want action now. So we are working really hard on getting some of these resources to you guys as soon as we possibly can.
One of the things that's unique with CRT also is, that's unique to this county, is every one of our CRT officers are sworn in by Sheriff Spurlock, who is now given the Castle Rock officer, the Lone Tree officer, the Parker officer, legal authority to go anywhere in this county and enforce anywhere they need to go. So our CRT officer from Castle Rock goes into unincorporated Douglas County, as the Parker officer can go into Castle Rock. They go anywhere. And that's the other concept that we would build with this, is when we grow, we would have that same collaborative partnership and give these officers legal authority everywhere.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, it's a compassionate response that has been a runaway success in Douglas County. I really have to thank you, Chief, and Laura Cinconi and Barbara Drake and everybody involved with the mental health initiative, because the diversions have saved a lot of money. VA's budget, sheriff's budget. We as a county fund you and fund the sheriff's office and this program, because it's been really successful. So hopefully a navigator can be that both and passionate response that people feel comfortable.
All right, Chief Serapis or Commander Dagenhart, the last but not least.
Well, good morning, everybody. And before we begin, I just wanted to echo the same thing that Chief Wilson and Chief Duffy were saying about the CRT units. We'd be in favor of having both, so we're not tying up the CRT units, dealing with homelessness all the time. So just for that, but we have Jamie Nguyen here, who's our town attorneys from the town attorney's office. And then we also have Joe Dagenhart here, who oversees CRT and the community services officers. And then our CSO manager, Anthony Mazzeo, that will kind of take over and just talk briefly about, what we're seeing in the town. And then Jamie's going to talk a little bit about the ordinance and then the modifications that we made about the ordinance. So with that, I'll turn it over to Commander Dagenhart, Joe Dagenhart, to take over.
Yeah, hi, good morning. So far this year, we've had 15 contacts that were transient folks. As the weather gets warmer, we'll probably see more, but thankfully, most of our contacts are people moving through. So if they are in a floodplain, that is what we will enforce. We'll tag their camp. They'll have 72 hours to move on, and if they don't, then we can enforce that. Also, if they abandon that camp within that 72 hours, then we partner with our community services division with the Parks Department, and we get that cleaned up and taken care of. So that's kind of where we're at with our transient population. And obviously, like all the other agencies, we offer the resources and things for those folks if they need it. So,
we usually run, we work very closely with the Parker Task Force and C-Corps, the Southeast Christian Church, community, to help out with any resources that some of the homeless folks may need. So they've been very helpful with the needs that we look at. I think for, the year, like Joe was saying, we have 15 for the year that we've contacted, but a lot of them are just passing through. We have a handful. I think we have 3 that we're dealing with that are in town that we deal with on a regular basis. So that's kind of where we're coming from as far as the homeless folks that we're contacting here in Parker.
This is Jamie Nguyen. I know Amy raised the issue of some of the case law that's been reviewed, and it's come up a couple of times, which is what Parker did back in 2020. We looked at the cases that were coming out requiring allowing people to move to shelters and things like that if you have the resources, and Parker does not have any shelters in our jurisdiction. We don't have a lot of those resources. So while our camping ban is still technically on the books, we have stopped enforcing that. What we did in 2020, based on discussions with the Mile High Flood District and sample ordinances that they had provided, we worked with them and we drafted an unauthorized camping in the designated floodplains. And that is the only ordinance that we are currently enforcing at all. So we put that on our books 2 years ago. And we have created maps that are on our website that show all of the floodplains within the town. People can come into town hall and request copies of those maps so they know where those are. And the only time we will enforce is if we get calls that someone's in our floodplain areas and it's purely a safety reason. Our ordinance goes through all of the reasons and legislative intent behind that. And we do contact people a few times. We let them know about the ordinance. We engage in discussions. If they need resources, we try to refer them to resources. And if none of that works, we do post a notice that gives them 72 hours to clear out that camp. If they do not clear it out, we can remove their personal property. Our ordinance spells out what we can get rid of and what we maintain, and any personal property we take, we hold for 30 days, and they have the right to come retrieve that within the 30 days.
So that kind of sums up everything that we're doing, some of the things that we're seeing. Does anybody have any questions for us at all?
Chief Stropis, I have one question. This is Dan. Are you seeing any activity around the Parker Task Force?
I don't think that we've seen a lot of activity there. It's usually down in the trail system, over by, the creek area. So really nothing over by Parker Task Force or Secor.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I think we've heard a lot of good information and heard a lot of different approaches. I think I think what I have heard overwhelmingly is that there is very much a need and an opportunity to work collaboratively together. I think that it sounds like everybody has a lot of the same things in place currently. And so, we can build upon that as much as we possibly can. In the interest of time, I think we want to move forward. We do have, Luke, if you could bring up the presentation. I did want to bring up, we did actually have one of our first cleanups that we had to do through Douglas County. This happened last week, and it brings up a lot of points for us that you all, I think, are dealing with on a regular basis. At this site, what we found, we did a safety check with the sheriff's office. Thank you for that. To really go out there and determine what was the extent of the cleanup that was required, and to understand if it was abandoned or not, if it was active camp or if it was abandoned. And actually in this case, and I think we were quite lucky that this was the case, it was obvious that it had been either long abandoned or was being used for like an additional dumping, essentially. So yes, we did have a lot to clean up out there, and it did have indications that it was a camp at one point, but it was abandoned. We were also very lucky in the fact that we do have a cleanup service that the county has contracted with to do environmental cleanups, and they had the capacity to do a biohazard cleanup for us. So we were able to clean this up, if you could move to the next slide, Luke, pretty quickly. But it does bring up a lot of points that you all are bringing up, and I just wonder if there isn't an opportunity for us to coordinate going forward, maybe have one company that we contract with and have the ability to send people out there to do the cleanup more efficiently and as quickly as possible. Because one of the first things we did have to determine was, what is the jurisdiction here? And it did turn out that it was on county property. And so that allowed us to move really quickly. But if you're determining which jurisdiction and then contacting them and making those, having to go through all those different steps, it looks like a very different situation. So.
And we do want to thank Chief Duffy and Captain Rogers, who
Absolutely.
On a moment's notice, we called. We didn't want anyone to go out by themselves. We had no idea what they'd be walking into, and the sheriff's office sent multiple people with them just to make sure that the camp itself was safe for us to explore what was actually going on.
Right. And we were also lucky in that we did not have valuable personal property that was on site, because that would have been a different situation as well. So a lot of things came up as a result of that, and just want to acknowledge that and look at that as an opportunity on how we can maybe coordinate going forward.
Jen, I'm curious, what was the cost of that cleanup?
I actually do not know yet.
We're
We
still
have
waiting.
not been invoiced.
$1.2 million.
Just curious.
I just want to make sure that everybody understands this. It was hauled in as an encampment. We've had no call. We've had maybe a half a dozen calls where we've contacted homeless people walking in up and down the frontage roads off Surrey Ridge. But really no people living in the area or anything like that. There's evidence that this was more of a dump, to where we could see the tire tracks where somebody just backed in and dumped the trash. But it's also an area to where, even with a dump site like that, the homeless will go scavenge through that to get whatever they can out of there, so it can be used for both. But we saw no evidence of like encampment. But it was a big problem that,
And as you said, more to come. I mean, we expect more to come.
And
It's this.
as the warmer it gets, we're gonna run into having, Castle gets, what I call the local experts on cleanups. Sorry.
The third party's is expensive. I don't have the hourly rate in my head, but you know, it's biohazard. It's a company that needs to have expertise. So it's expensive, but we also don't want untrained Parks Department people doing it either because it's too much of a risk. So there are good companies out there that will do it. And like I said, we're just getting started into this, so we can kind of let you know how it goes.
Absolutely, yeah. We'll be very interested to talk more with you all about that. So do want to move forward. And we do have, you know, some recommended approaches that we wanted to bring forward to this group and have a conversation about, just introduce these ideas. Dan talked a little bit about the co-responder approach that we're putting together. Luke, if you could bring up the pallet model shelter option. We've heard loud and clear that shelter is something that is needed if we are going to do any sort of really enforcement. It is important for us to have some place to direct people to as an option, right? This is one model, and I do want to say we are exploring multiple different avenues and checking in, looking at models from different jurisdictions to see what they are utilizing. And sometimes it's a blended approach. And I would say sometimes it could be a short-term approach. What we're looking at here, I would say, is a little more long-term because it is going to require a location. But what we're looking at, we're very interested in this model because it is very scalable. County manager refers to these as tough sheds. And they do look a little bit like that. But they do have electricity that is connected to them. They can be put up very quickly. They're economical. And they are being used as a model throughout the nation, actually. And the city of Aurora just put up a site that is secure with fencing, that sort of thing. That's something we would be very interested in looking at. They did it with 30. And they did it in partnership with the Salvation Army. And we would be looking, and that would be to provide those supportive services and manage the site. So we would be looking at something that could be similar to that. This is one option, but it is scalable. It is, as I said, it's economical. And you know, there is the benefit of coupling that with those supportive services, which is a little bit along the lines of Springs Rescue Mission, right? They provide that whole person continuum of care. So we did add the Springs Rescue Mission on there. We are trying to very much keep that in mind, but understand that that's probably a long-term approach, and what we may need to do is some short-term solutions as well. And that could look like hotel vouchers, that could look like designated parking, that could look like lots of different options, but maybe even just a couple of these on a certain site.
We may be asking our nonprofit partners if they would be interested in hosting a site or two of these and have them scattered out across the county, knowing that you guys are going to get lots of complaints from the citizens if we have this. But we need to figure out some way. I know Mike's all in for that all the time. We can put a bunch of pallets at the rock, but I do think we're going to need to figure out a short-term strategy to start having the actual officer, if someone is willing to move along, a place for them to be able to take them, store their property, and hopefully get them in a path, as Chief Wilson said, out of where they are. So this is certainly early in the concept, but we're starting this. We don't.
Do these allow pets?
Actually, in Grand Junction, they did set up pet designated areas. So yes, they can work with us on that.
I would just add that the purpose is that interrelation. And many of you have heard about the Goals facility in Arapahoe County, which is continuum of care for families. So if you have a child, food and shelter for a period of time, but it's also mental health resources, job counseling. It's a partnership with 80 Works, substance abuse counseling. This could perhaps incorporate some of that model for individuals that do not have families. And maybe there's that criminal reintegration piece, and hopefully provide some relief for law enforcement so that if a co-responder team is contacted, transportation can be provided to a whole person care facility that's clean, it's aesthetic, and it also is sand in the gears. It's not your permanent home. There's, I think, things associated with it that we saw from Jack Briggs.
Yes, absolutely. So did want to let you all know that we are looking at those models. This may not be the one we end up with, but we're certainly looking at all the different models that could be available.
So for the municipalities, it would be great for you guys to think about if the county were to be able to actualize this, would there be a place, is there a nonprofit partner that would be willing, if we had scattered sites? I'm not sure if that's the best way to go about it, but that might be what we have to do early on. The county is also looking at land that they own or that we own. I'm a they. So we all are in this together, but the county is really interested in helping this be something that we are able to actualize very, very soon.
Yes.
So moving on, we also have a proposal that is a joint proposal. It's really the sheriff's office proposal, but I'm a part of the proposal that we will be bringing to the board hopefully in May for to I would say beef up the reintegration program from the sheriff's office, from the jail, to actually fund another deputy and a car or a van. That would take what Chief Duffy said a little bit further for the folks who are orphaned out here, who are arrested and no place to go, get their medications filled, try to get them a little bit more squared away, and then bring them to wherever they want to go. Because we don't want to continue to orphan people in Douglas County. And, you know, where my office is, in the Human Services building, all day I see people, depending on the day, more or less, but we can have people sleeping on the sidewalk in front of Human Services, using our phone, charging their phones. We're the only pay phone or the only phone in between the Justice Center and wherever they're walking to. So the volume is there. Like Chief Duffy says, we can't force someone to get in the car, but I think if we have a more coordinated actual program that the chief started when he was a captain in detentions, I think it can only be better for the folks who are being discharged.
And in addition to that, you know, I hear what you all are saying about, you know, officers actually paying for trips, that sort of thing, you know, to help people move along. And I think that there are additional transportation resources that we might be able to utilize to supplement what we're talking about here. So we understand that's not the only solution that we'll need, that there are more things that we need to do. And we're going to look at those funding sources to see what we can do to meet that need. So.
And I would say that Lieutenant McMillan and Nicole Beckett from the jail did a phenomenal job of looking at this program, giving us good data that we will be presenting to the board here very soon. So we're really excited about that. And then the last update from me is Commissioner Layden just spoke about it a little bit, but we did apply for federal funds, earmark funds, through Representative Jason Crow, and did receive $1 million to join the goals program in Aurora, which is a whole person family community supported living program that, as Commissioner Layden said, there are medical, dental, behavioral health resources, job resources through 80 Works. Arapahoe County is building an actual childcare center in the middle of the goals program. So if you know about it, it's the Excelsior campus. It used to be a huge residential treatment center for girls in Aurora that was closed. So AmeriCorps has half the campus, and now the goals program has the other half of the campus. So Arapahoe County, through Family Tree is the organization who runs it. Arapahoe County has 3 of the 6 dorms. We will have 1 of the dorms, and then the child care center and administrative offices alike. So once that is finished, we will likely have one of our meetings there. Commissioner Layden and Barbara and my crew have toured it a few times, and we were lucky that both Arapahoe County Human Services and the City of Aurora allowed Douglas County to partner in this regional way of addressing it. And we're excited Depending on the size of the family, we could have anywhere between 3 and I would say 8 families, because I think there's a maximum of 15 people that can be there. So they live in dorm rooms that will be retrofitted, and then there's community living, kitchens, showers. It's a really, so we will be there next Wednesday with Representative Crow as he gives us the $1 million, and then they'll start construction.
So Dan, that would be if we in law enforcement come across a family that we feel might be eligible for this, we would go through your office.
How the entree into there is still we have to work out, because the construction is going to take probably 9 months. So right now, what we're thinking is Rand's program, DC Cares. We would have families apply through what that already established application process is. Rand's program would screen. They would go into the housing, and then we're going to reintegrate them back through case management through DC Cares, because we also don't want, if possible, is we don't want people to have to leave the county. We want to reintegrate them back in with other community supports.
Very exciting. So the last one that we wanted to present to you all is a public awareness campaign that we're talking about it. We've had some conversation early on today about, signs and that sort of thing. And I think we do agree that we have very generous residents in Douglas County, and they very much want to help where they can. So we've seen other models where, there is kind of a public awareness campaign on, and having a sign that very clearly states, these are some different examples of signs that very clearly state, please do not give money or items, directly to people. There is another way to provide services in your community and be able to make a difference. And I think that's what people are looking for. And in all of these examples, there is also a designated way to contact, to make a connection. And we would be looking at doing the same, something along those lines. Some of these have kind of a text to give sort of idea associated with that. And I think that we do have an opportunity to do perhaps a community fund that people could give to, that could be coordinated through our community foundation as a way to collect for funds to help support the needs of this population in a more hopefully robust way, and allow us the ability to leverage and all those great things, but give people a way to help and communicate that to them. And I would say, this is something we're very interested in working with the other municipalities about, and working on a campaign that supports the needs of all the communities, work with our public information officers to, what's the best way to model this and roll this out. We have tremendous amount of resources when it comes to those public information officers. We can do not only the signs that are located strategically throughout each of our communities, but also use social media, use our newsletters, podcasts, any sort of avenues that we have to let people know what they can do to help, and how they can, we know they do have a heart, and we want to give them a way to contribute to the solutions. So that's the recommendations that our staff is working on, that we're very interested in working alongside everyone else. We wanted to present those and have a chance, and I know we're getting very close, and we still had Dr. Reif on there. Do you mind if we do a quick discussion? And okay. But do want to thank you for that. Do want to find out if there's any input or questions or discussion along these lines with these ideas in mind.
I think with the signage, there might be an opportunity to show a unified front with the county, maybe the badges from each jurisdiction all on the same sign that we could use throughout the jurisdictions. And to Chief Duffy's point, to professional panhandlers, if they know that these signs are going to be on all these corners, they'll be less likely try to do business in Douglas County. But I think if we show a unified front with all the law enforcement agency, not that this is a law enforcement problem, but we're all on the same page, I think that would be great.
So I would, let me just weigh in this. I would be really cautious about how I would not put badges on these signs. Just my personal opinion. Because I don't think it goes over so well. If it's really the government saying, don't give people money, I really think we need to figure out a way to partner with our community partners and have not just the government saying, don't do it, but our community partners on board with how we're going to solve or try to solve homelessness and get people on a path to not being homeless. And so I would be cautious about putting badges on these. I think there could be an opposite reaction to that message. So I just be really cautious about that. And I think that the messaging is, we absolutely should do it. It should be county-wide. If we could all agree on how that signage looks, which I think will be difficult to get everybody to say, yep, that's the kind of message I want to give. I love the fact that we can have a fund that can help fund resources to address this issue, whether it's sheltering or, again, my personal belief is it's a pathway out of homelessness. That's what we should be trying to get people to. And that, to me, is what the message needs to be. And I would be cautious about making it a solely government message, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And if we did like stuff online, whether it's a video about how to address homelessness, or it's a whatever campaign we come up with that we push out, we better have some community partners there, faith-based groups, large businesses, and people that want to get on board with trying to help solve this and not just be the government trying to do it. I would just be really cautious about that.
Yeah, I think you see, I mean, if you look at the signs there, you know, it's really looking towards compassion, especially the heart. I mean, I think our audience is the Douglas County residents more than anything, right? And I think you're right. The panhandlers are go, you know, I'll move somewhere else, or this isn't good for my business. Mm-hmm. But hitting the compassion piece of it, I think, is important, and perhaps, you know, the law enforcement part of it isn't the best way to go. I mean, I like, you know, something like the heart or whatever, but something that's consistent, something that's collaborative, that we're all in it together. I think they could be effective. So it's definitely worth looking at.
We're gonna put together a sign group.
Have we reached out? Have we reached out to some of the communities that you have used these type of signs, and have they seen a decline in panhandling based on the messaging?
We know that the one that says handouts don't help, that's from Colorado Springs. So we have not reached out yet, but we know that we can at least reach out to them and find out their effectiveness, and we can report back on that. And Dan's right, we do want to put together a committee that takes a look at this, and we would love everyone's participation in that so that we can, you know, come to agreement on what that looks like and how we move that forward.
Real quick, so Colorado Springs, when they first released those, I did talk with them quite extensively. They put those on all the medians that it had been designated as not being appropriate. So based on the traffic flow and the size, that's where they posted them, was on those medians. And it's good for the public awareness. It may not solve the panhandling issue, but from the public's perspective, to know that there is another option has been very positive.
$20 here rather than
yeah.
And I know
Been the real impact.
we have a couple comments, Councilman Dietz and Councilman, yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, just I had a question. So thanks I love the direction this group and this body is headed toward and the progress we're making. And thank you, Chiefs, for all sharing your stories. The question is, I know the collaboration piece, we already have that here regionally, but the HMIS seems to make sense to plug into that because apparently there are a lot of the same faces, a lot of the same names, and I'm sure there's a database of them somewhere, somehow, some way. So is that still part of the conversation in terms of our involvement and engagement there?
I think
We're talking about it regularly.
Great, okay, perfect, great.
And that would be part of the approach that we would want the co-responder, the navigator, to be connected.
Sure. And with Dr. Reif and the regional approach. I mean, we're going to continue to hear that Douglas County can't solve this on our own because, as Chief Duffy said, every time Denver or Aurora does something, we feel the wave of people. And in the summer, that's only going to be more because Denver is going full blast in the local city to try to disperse, and people are going to have to be moved other places, and they will come here, especially when it's warm.
I think that's a good point, though. Yeah. Councilman Dietz.
I think there's actually something to that sign committee. I think, we've got a video in Castle Rock on how to use roundabouts, but do you think people watch it? So I'm more interested, how can we really get to the public, like Chief Cully is about, you know, the one-on-one approach, really getting out there. I think there's something to that. Heck, you can put my face on the signs, that will dissuade them maybe. So I just think there is something to that about how can we do it with a more compassion. I'm a firm believer in giving to local charities and everything else versus just giving. I don't give my kid $20 when he just asks either, you know, are you gonna earn it or something? So actually, it's not a far-fetched comment. Really gotta look at that. That's my only thing there, and I really think you officers already have enough. I think it's a great idea, but I think there's already enough bad press from people out there. You start throwing police is doing this. I wanna speak for you folks, firm believer in my police and fire departments everywhere. I want them to be the face of joy. When those people see you guys, I want them to know that there's somebody's gonna help me. That's it.
And just know that wasn't, we really are gonna put a sign group together. Like that is a direction that we received yesterday. So we will be doing that as soon as possible.
And then we're gonna go to.
Okay, and just real quick, when you put the sign committee together, make sure there's a legal component to it. When you get into signage, you're getting into your sign codes. All of the people in this room probably have local regulations that deal with that. Government speech is generally exempted from First Amendment, but other speech is not. And so these do need to be government signs and government speech, or they're going to be subject to content-based challenges. So just be aware of that going in. It might not be the most attractive sign you would choose that gets that agreement for uniformity, but don't forget the First Amendment element to it. If it's not government speech, it's going to be regulated.
So maybe would it make sense to have our government logos instead of the law enforcement logos if the municipalities were open to that?
Yeah, potentially.
Yeah.
And just making clear, these are official signs and these are government signs. And maybe the initial phone number should be a government phone number or text, and then forward it on to one of these agencies where funds could be given. So just, it's a background consideration. I would never say no. I think this is a great idea and I'll help make it happen, but don't forget that element.
Yeah, Councilmember Parker, Town Council. On the community fund, would that be funds collected from the various governments? Would that be from nonprofits? And then would certain places be able to apply for a grant from those funds? Say the Oyo Hotel that's now funding people on hotel vouchers. Is that what you have in mind? Because I know the Oyo Hotel does a lot of that, and a lot of that is also not covered. So there is a great need for a community fund and then grants to be dispersed from that fund to these short-term stay providers.
Right, sure.
We have something called the Douglas County Community Foundation, which all of the municipalities are getting more active with. We appreciate that. But instead of giving money to government, that's a great avenue. That's kind of our local Red Cross, which could be a nice, scan code there.
Right.
And maybe it's also the number to the co-responder team as well, because part of it is educating the public about resources and opportunities, I think.
But I'm curious, is this a new community fund? Or is this presently operating? Because I was briefed on the Douglas County Community Foundation, and homelessness was not a big part of that from the town of Parker. Mental health was. So I'm asking now, how will this go forward with this community fund?
We would have to follow up with the Douglas County Community Fund to identify a fund. It could be a designated fund for this purpose. I know that they have the capacity to do that, and I'm sure the willingness to do that. So funds that come into this particular fund would then be used only for homeless resources. Now, as far as how that's distributed, we would talk with them about that. I mean, if there was, say, one agency maybe that we were working with to, say, provide support for a shelter, we might, want the funds to be designated for that area. or if we're working with a lot of nonprofits, which is kind of the case right now. We coordinate our resources with nonprofits across the community. They could apply to that as well. It is very flexible, and I know the Community Foundation would work with us on a designated fund for that.
It's an upcoming fund, right? Okay, just
right now.
right, just trying to get some clarification on that. So when that is rolled out, the appropriate towns can be briefed on that. Thank you.
It's like the Marshall Fire. So like the Boulder County Community Foundation had the wildfire fund that immediately got $20 million. So the Douglas County Community Foundation is very nimble, can set up that fund, and there's a grant review process to get that out. But it sounds like you benefit from maybe, we'll try to get you more information.
Okay, any other questions? I know we're a little beyond our time. And we will definitely plan to bring Dr. Reif back. Thank you so much for your flexibility.
And we like your participation, so we hope you just continue to come. Thank you.
Come back and present next month. Thank you. Okay, do we have any public comments online or in the room? We do want to honor that aspect of the agenda.
I think we have a citizen here with us, our most important employer.
I think I'm the only one, I think, right? I think my family, my wife and I are setting up a foundation in order to provide funds somehow. We're Castle Rock to help fund this initiative. And we're not really sure how we can do that and what's the best use of those funds to honor folks in this room who protect our community and have to do all the legwork on the street. Protect and respect the citizens who pay the taxes and live here. What does that look like? Providing funds for helping to feed the homeless, helping to shelter the homeless. It's a huge problem. And so we're trying to figure out how we can plug ourselves in here and to help contribute somehow. So this is kind of our first initial step into this project to try to figure this out. And I'm not really sure what it looks like so far. We have some ideas. Again, it's such a dynamic sort of ways to try to help. We just don't know where.
We're out of time, but I'm just thinking when we're talking about Douglas County Community Foundation with the designated homeless fund, maybe that's something where you, your wife, and many others in the community can contribute to and help fund these operations that the collective is coming up with.
Yeah, we were thinking about, gosh, wouldn't it be amazing just to have a huge food truck to be able to feed folks, right? But then we know that could also maybe we have to be sensitive to business owners. We have to be sensitive to community, people who live here, to law enforcement officers. So maybe that's not the best way to do a private sort of outreach. Maybe it's better to fund a organization like Douglas County to create specific folders or tabs to be able to fund specific initiatives. Maybe sounds like that's something you guys are exploring.
Yeah, thank you for your interest. That's wonderful.
Follow up on that. Food's not the issue here, right? I mean, there's lots of food available in Douglas County. Nobody's going without unless they just are ignorant. So anything that you do, and I commend you, but I wouldn't focus it on food at this point, except to say, helping the existing food pantries procure more. But since this supply chain stuff is killing us right now, but other than that, I mean, there's lots of food available in terms of folks who just need to know how to get it easier.
I just wait real quick too, Jim. To that point, and again, I appreciate the fact that I'm glad we have citizens here. I think that's who we need to get involved. But I think having been in the Springs when the transient problem really blew up, before I left there, what happened is there was a real lack of, and I love the fact we have this group, right? But this group didn't exist there at that time. And the way we were trying to handle and I'm not trying to badmouth Colorado Springs, but at the very beginning, it wasn't handled well. Really what they wanted was law enforcement to go in and handle it. Which led to some case law and some other things that happened because they were trying to police their way out of it. And I wouldn't even say that's what the police department wanted to do. That's what we were directed to do, right? They passed laws from the city council and okay, go enforce these laws. And those laws involved panhandling and all sorts of things that backfired. And then we had citizen groups who took their own initiative, decided, here's what I'm going to do to solve this. And it actually exasperated the problem to the point where we had those massive tent cities down the creek and all sorts of other problems that came out of that because it just created a place where we just had all these camps that popped up because we had all these private interest folks coming in to help, but the reality was it wasn't helping. So now they're trying to dig their way out by this more regional approach and by a more focused approach on here's where we want you to give money, and now we're going to try to get folks a pathway out, right? But that problem is now so exasperated, it's going to take them years to probably even come to some conclusion. So we need to be quick and swift, setting up a plan, getting places where folks can give money and to help contribute, or they are going to do it themselves without us. And it could cause the exasperating of this problem. So I think, great we're having these meetings, but one of the things that occurred to me is when I'm sitting here thinking is, okay, what's the next step? Yeah. How fast are we going to get these signs done? Where are we going to get this fund set up so people can donate? Because this problem is coming to Douglas County, I think, a lot in this last year. And there are going to be people, there are going to be church groups, there are going to be people that are eventually going to step up and do what they want to do. And it could exasperate our problem here and not help our problem. So we need to be, I think, swift in whatever we decide to do and have some really next steps and some set goals. Like by next month, we're going to have signage set up. We're going to have a fun place, right? And then start setting some real solid goals. But anyway, that's my 2 cents. And trust me, you don't want to see what happened in Springs happen in Douglas County.
I tend to agree with him. It's action now.
Yeah.
If I may ask, just as a private citizen, I think that's great news. And that gives me a lot of clarity and direction that we versus exacerbating the problem. I think what would be helpful is if you created a fund like that where people contribute to, there's a lot of transparency on where that money goes. Yeah, so that's just.
So let me just comment on behalf of the county that I know we are committed to immediate action that's impactful, that is informed. So my invitation again is any recommendation you've heard today, please let staff know what your thoughts are. And then if you have ideas or concepts that you haven't heard that you feel like we need to be talking about, please get them to our county staff. And then at our May meeting, we should have some pretty significant swift action items for all of us to chat about.
Yes.
Thanks for that, though.
Much more coordination to come.
You know what we've learned, and we're over time, there is no one who owned this in Douglas County. So Jen and I, this is not actually what we do for a living. And the county has realized that we need to actually have people who own this as a program. We're getting there, I promise. And by May, you're gonna see some things for sure.
Yes, yes, we'll be bringing things forward, and you'll hear much more about committees, groups coming together before May so that we can get those things going. I hear loud and clear what you're saying, and we certainly have to factor that into our public awareness campaign so that we can direct people's generosity and their goodwill. So, okay.
Thanks,
Well, thank
everybody.
you all very much.
His language.